Hey guys, welcome back to this jam-packed, super exciting edition of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Quinn. I haven't slept in 70-something hours, but I am excited to be here with my friend, co-host, Greg Thompson. How you doing, my man?
Good. It's crazy. I'm so excited to talk about tonight. This might be my favorite podcast we've done so far.
Host, Greg Thompson. Absolutely.
Good.
You didn't remind me to turn off my feed, so shame on
That is
me.
my fault. We
Yeah.
normally say that to each other before we start.
Shame on me for having that going. But anyway, we're going to get right into it. Obviously, I want to tell you guys a little bit about Cover One. If this is your first time coming here and seeing us on YouTube or listening to the podcast, head over to cover1.net. Right now, we're still running our deal for a $10 premium membership for the entire year. It's really a deal that you can't beat. Draft guides are going to be $10. You're going to buy those anyways. This is draft, Bills coverage, really everything you could ever want. Eric was in our Slack channel film room just tossing stuff up. I don't even know how he was doing it as these free agents were coming in. He must have been 2 to 3 screens of watching multiple guys because he was popping stuff up in the film room that we were getting before anyone on Twitter was getting, and just the ability, the access to the writers, things like that. So hop over there and just make sure you're following the content because the guys are pumping it out. We're not going to spend too much time talking about it. But Greg, you've been very active over in the Slack channel, and I know that's your favorite part. Do you want to tell the people a little bit about that before we rip right into free agency?
Yeah, it's awesome. I describe it all the time as kind of our own personal Bills Twitter. It's fantastic. You have guys who are searching every different medium, Instagram, social media, Reddit, Facebook, looking for different things, bringing it into the group, comparing notes, talking back and forth, and it's just an awesome community. And can't talk it up enough. And I know we have a ton to go through tonight, but it's totally worth it. And I hope you guys take a look.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit again about Cover One at the end here, so hang in there. Welcome everybody that's in the chat. The chat was ripping here before we got the room going and got this show live. If you don't know, you can watch our show live on YouTube Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's always a great chat. So I know it's going to probably rip a little too fast for me to be too active tonight, but thank you for everyone coming out to participate. So Greg, I know you made a fancy spreadsheet because you're you're super anal in those ways. Yeah, you're an anal nerd, and you had to have it all organized. So let's go right in a timeline of free agency here and just kind of pick it apart one at a time. And then, towards the end of the show here tonight, we can talk about what's left out there and what holes are left, and maybe project some ideas out there if nothing happens while we're live.
It's so funny. The timelines like this over a pretty much 48-hour window. I think it was pretty firm. I don't know that there was a lot that happened today. So within that 48-hour window of Monday and Tuesday, it's crazy how people react to those things when the Bills don't have news immediately. And it kind of trickled in, and we'll go through that and we'll laugh about a couple of these. But if the order of the signings had been a little different, the reaction and the amount of time you and I wasted on Twitter arguing with people would have been so different. So it's so funny. The Bills and Brandon Beane kicked things off with what was actually a signing they could have made anytime in the last week. They brought in Kevin Johnson, cornerback from Houston. It's been reported as a 1-year, $4.5 million deal. Went back and forth a little bit with Matthew Fairburn, who had that initial report. It got deleted off Twitter, so we're still waiting on the terms. I don't think it's going to be drastically different than that. I projected him maybe closer to $5 or $6 million. We talked about him a little bit last week and the upside that he has, why he was a first-round pick, the elite athleticism, but that he was released for a reason because he couldn't stay healthy. So I think with Levi Wallace, he's a great addition as that competition at quarterback too that we've both been looking for. And I'm happy, and on a 1-year mid-level price, I think is great. And it's at best, it's great depth. At worst, he's someone there to push Levi Wallace and hope he's ready to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw a tweet out there, and I think it was Matt Perino of New York Upstate that was tweeting it out about him saying that he specifically liked Buffalo because of their attention to player health and the player health facilities that they have here, which for a guy like that who's had these issues in his career with health, that's really a big thing. And we've seen it here in the time in Buffalo, and them really very concerned about availability of players. So for them to sign some guys that are dinged up like this, and then for the guy to come out and say that, I thought that really stood out to me, that he's a player that knows that he's had these health issues. He knows that's a knock against him, and that's why he had to take take this 1-year deal. So it'll be interesting to see if he can stay healthy this year. And all the reports coming out of Houston are that if he can stay healthy and regain his confidence, he's actually a really solid contributing cornerback in this league. And that's really, you can go back on these podcasts for the last couple of weeks. You and I have talked about it a bunch. I know fans really liked what Levi Wallace did at the end of the year. I'm pumping the brakes a little bit on him because I've been burned by rookie performances before, or guys that come out and really play well for a half of a year. I need to see more. And I think that the team feels the same way and add some, depth, possible competition at that cornerback 2 spot. It's not a sexy name. It's not a name that, is going to come in and say, oh, well, now he and Trey are going to shut everybody down. But these two and Frazier and McDermott have shown the ability to find guys that fit their scheme, and hopefully this is just another one of those guys.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that it was a nice, safe hit. We both had a couple other names you threw out there, but he was right there in that mix, equal to them. There's a reason they were available, and they snagged one, and that was good.
Yeah.
The second of the 8 signings that took place, I think I feel pretty comfortable. You and I spent the most disproportionate amount of time talking about and oddly defending on Twitter.
Yeah.
And that was 36-year-old running back Frank Gore signing for 1 year, $2 million. He is 36. He is the 4th highest yardage total running back in history.
Yeah.
It is funny that we already had the 2 oldest running backs in the league on contract, and now added the oldest to have the 3 most, advanced age running backs in league history. We saw a myriad of jokes from Jim Brown to OJ Simpson to bringing back Freddie Jackson. I will say it's kind of funny. Frank Gore is actually a little under 2 years younger than Freddie Jackson. So it's actually kind of odd that he's still playing. But the real part is, if he had been on the Bills last year, he would have been our best running back. He had the most production and the highest yards per carry, the best yards after contact. He was still productive. So it's crazy that at age 35, he was still productive, but he was. And he is renowned throughout the league as one of the best work ethics in the entire league and one of the most respected players in the entire league. So he's the exact kind of guy that, McDermott and Bean want to have in that locker room. So I think it was a little overdone in how crazy people went, and that does it really matter if we have 31-year-old Chris Ivory or 36-year-old Frank Gore as our backup running back being a mentor for the running back we hopefully draft? I don't think so, but I get the jokes, and it was fine. I just thought it was overboard.
The jokes, whatever, they make a good tweet. I hate that stuff personally, but I get it. I think I have funnier jokes than that, but I too understand what people are doing there, but people were taking it seriously and were seriously mad. I had people in my DMs texting me, friends, that, they were upset about this. I think a lot of it came down to timing of when the signing happened. It was one of the first signings of free agency. We saw some other bigger moves from other teams and leaks about information and other guys making moves. People were antsy. We had heard all about this money the Bills were going to spend and bring in these weapons for Josh Allen, and then Frank Gore comes across their feed. And so I think the timing, if Frank Gore was the last signing here, people would just be like, oh, okay, whatever, it's fine. But where he was really one of the, outside of the guy we knew had already visited, another not big name, people are like, oh, great, what a start to free agency. This is going to be the oldest running back in the league. But yeah, like you said, when you get down to it, I said this on Pat Morin's podcast. He has me on for a segment. I said, when you have a chance to bring in a guy like Frank Gore into your organization for $2 million, I don't care how old he is, you do it. Obviously, Derek Anderson we have in here, but Frank Gore is actually productive. Where Derek Anderson, I don't ever want to see him play a game of football for the Bills again. I just want him in the building, working with the quarterback. I think Frank Gore provides that, but also the ability to produce. We saw him coming off a 700-yard year, 4.6 yards a carry. If I would have told you we signed Mark Ingram for 1 year, $2 million, people would have been ecstatic. They would have lost their minds that we got that deal. So he still has the ability to produce. Whether or not Shady's on this team, there's been rumors of Shady, on his way out. Frank Gore is a nice backup for this team moving forward, no matter what, for 2019. And that's all it's about, is one guy for 2019. It doesn't keep them from drafting a rookie. In fact, if anything, it tells me they're definitely going to draft a rookie and bring in some youth here at that third running back position. So I don't know. Yeah, I think even now we're spending too much time talking and defending him, but I wasted almost half of my day just defending that it's not that bad of a thing, guys.
Yeah, and I'll even give the caveat that if we get to May 1st and the draft is finished and we don't draft a running back and we go into next year with only LaShawn McCoy, Chris Ivory, and Frank Gore, I will be equally upset with everybody else. I am 99% that between now and May 1st, we are going to release Chris Ivory, which makes Frank Gore signing basically free. We save about $200,000 by swapping out Ivory's 2.2 or 3 million with 750 dead cap and blah, 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 2.2 million versus Gore's 2 million. And then we're going to draft a running back who's going to be a great person to learn under LaShawn McCoy and Frank Gore. And if we don't do that, I'll be equally upset with everybody else. As long as we do that, I don't care who the veteran backup running back was. And like you said, we've already spent enough time on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now moving into probably what was the first little bit of a relief signing was Tyler Croft. He's a tight end from Cincinnati, 6'6", 256, fairly athletic at the combine, but some decent blocking skills. We signed him to a 3-year, $18 million deal, which was the going rate for these middle-of-the-road meh tight ends that are out there. It's the exact same kind of deal that Jesse James got, and Nick Boyle, and CJ Uzoma, and Dwayne Allen, and all these guys got basically the same contract. So we picked Tyler Croft, apparently. It's only $4.9 million in the first year. We owe him nothing after that. So if he works out well, we have him for 3 years. If he doesn't, we only have him for this year, and we have basically very little obligation to him afterwards. And he was exactly what we talked about. I want our tight end of the future in the draft, but Tyler Croft is a perfectly fine initial band-aid. And if we end up drafting a mid-round, later round guy, say it's a Jay Sternberger or Foster Moreau or any of the 10 different tight ends later on that people like, then you want to know what? Tyler Croft can probably start for us most of the year. If we get lucky and early on take a TJ Hawkinson or a Noah Fant or brace yourself, Irv Smith, then if we get one of those guys, then Tyler Croft is an above average tight end too, who can be a nice contributor and help out where we need him. So he fits the exact need of what we talked about. He's going to be there for us. He is a decent tight end, and we're paying him the market rate for apparently what decent tight ends cost nowadays.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said here. When we were talking about the tight end position, I think I even said on this show, just give me any of the Cincinnati guys. I don't care. And that's how I really felt about the top of the tight end. I know a lot of fans fell in love with Jesse James. I think that was more just like the Pittsburgh blue collar thing. Because when you really look at the stats and what these guys are, they're really kind of all a bunch of meh. It was just kind of like your version of meh that you preferred. And Croft wasn't my top choice, but you know what? It's relatively all the same. I do think that there's going to be plenty of different ways to add talent to that position. And I think that they're definitely going to address it in the draft. And some of those guys that are going to shake off rosters might come available too. So we might see more competition added to this position in summer. I think they're going to try to push Jason Kroom a little bit at that final tight end position. So I do think they're going to try to add some weapons here and maybe some guy you haven't heard of who can come in and have a good camp. But I think Croft fits that need of steady, right? Like you just need a starter before we go into the draft that is steady, that we know can block in the NFL. He can be productive in the NFL and has been productive in the red zone. That's what we need. And then if we can get better at the position from there in the draft, we're absolutely going to try to do that. And if the board falls to us just the right way, we might really make a splash and do it fantastically. Very judiciousness in that approach. But so I'm not really worried about it. I think that he'll be a good, decent contributor here. It reminds me of some of the tight ends we've brought in the past, like a guy like Scott Chandler, even. Like he was a pretty meh guy and fans fell in love with him and he had some big plays, but he wasn't great. And that's okay.
Jay Reamersma. I mean, he's right in that mode. This is not our tight end of the future. I will say there's a sliver of upside. He did have a window where Tyler Eifert was hurt and he was the starter and had a decent run, I think in 2017. For the most part, he's had some challenges staying healthy too, so he's not a guy we can depend on. And you bring up a good point with Jason Kroom, and I know, we talked about Levi Wallace and bringing in Kevin Johnson. We'll talk about it here with a couple linemen that are going to push Wyatt Teller. We'll talk about it here with a couple receivers that are going to push Robert Foster. We got a little bit rose-colored glasses last year, our roster was so poor that we had guys who were young and started to flash just a little bit. And to us, we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. These are the greatest guys ever. And really, they were pretty good. And it's okay to bring in competition for those guys. And like you said, if we have a guy shake loose and have a chance to bring in another tight end cheap, and it ends up that Jason Kroom doesn't make this roster, that's okay. Like, he's not some critical piece of our future. Now, if he develops further and takes another material step forward in his overall balance and his ability to block and now route running, and add that to, some legitimate glimpses of potential we saw last year, that's great. But if he doesn't make this roster, that's an awesome problem to have. And that means we added 2 more people and had 3 tight ends who were valuable, and that might be okay. And I don't think Jason Kroom is the biggest surprise that we could see not making this 53-man roster. We're going to talk about it with the 9 guys we have listed here, which won't be the last free agents we list, then 10 more draft picks. And we're going to have some talented people and some names that people really like not make this team. And that's awesome. That's a great problem to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has always been the plan, and something we've talked about quite a bit on this show is freeing up all that dead cap medicine, as you put it, that we had to swallow last year is really going to allow them to create depth and competition in all these positions. No position is really safe outside of quarterback and middle linebacker, wherever they have rookie deals and potential superstars at those deals. No position is safe, and they're going to try to get as much depth at those positions as possible. And that's a great thing for the Bills, because we haven't had it for years where you just have depth across the board, real competition. I'm not talking about 2 guys you'd never have ever heard of going at it and they're calling it a competition. And last year we had positions where it was like the best of the worst got to start. Like whoever didn't fall on their face in summer got the starting job. Like, they basically gave Vontae Davis the starting job. They tried to make him lose it 5 or 6 different times, and nobody could be better than a guy that was about to retire. So we're not going to have that problem this year. You're going to see a lot of competition, a lot of guys fighting for spots. And when we get into the offensive line, the flexibility, I think, of positions is going to be a really interesting one to watch how that plays out.
Yeah, and I think our next signing was the last one on day one, and honestly is the biggest signing we made overall, and this is Mitch Morse. Mitch Morse is a center from Kansas City, 4 years, $45 million. I think technically the highest paid center in the NFL at $11.25 million per year. He's one of 5 or 6 guys now making right at 11.25. He was the only long-term contract we have. He's the only guy Mitch Morse is on this team for the next 2 or 3 years. There was nothing changing that. We gave him a large chunk of guaranteed money, the only one with a large chunk of guaranteed money, the only one with any guaranteed money past this year. He was our big splurge signing. We talked about that. We expected probably one splurge signing over 10 million and then a bunch of other value level guys. And that honestly is exactly what they did. And Mitch Morse was that splurge. And I will say, you and I were pretty honest about the fact that it's hard to gauge centers and who the better one was. And I think we both felt pretty good about Matt Paradis, but it was a matter of, do you weigh a 29-year-old turning 30 coming off a nasty leg injury versus a 26-year-old turning 27 who came off some concussion issues? Matt Paradis had a little bit better production probably, but Mitch Morse was also the better draft profile. He was bigger, taller, longer, faster, more athletic. Do they think they can coach that and turn that into something better? And from what was confirmed by Tim Graham and John Wawrow, this was not a negotiation between the two. Mitch Morse was their number one target from day one. They threw out a huge contract and Mitch signed it, and that was it. And that they were never directly in with Paradis other than making contact as a backup plan. And that Mitch Morse was their number one target, and they got him. And I'm going to give Bean the benefit of the doubt that if he says he's their number one guy and they wanted the younger guy who is a little bigger and more athletic, then I trust that. And I'm excited about it. And he's the kind of guy who can be here to really benefit and protect Josh Allen going forward.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how the whole center thing played out. Obviously, we knew that was going to be a target. As soon as the season ended, Gore and Bodine was just a seesaw of bad play this past year, which was really disappointing for Groy because he showed so much potential on this roster. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. So we knew that was going to be really the key of what they were trying to accomplish. up until the Senior Bowl, we didn't know how they were going to try to accomplish that, right? But once we heard Brandon Beane at the Senior Bowl talk about wanting a veteran to come in and fill that position because of Josh Allen and his development, then I think we all knew that even with them signing Long, that they were going to try to take a swing at one of the top two guys. And here they did. They took a swing. I like it. I like the aggressiveness. But Paradis was the guy that almost across the board, whether it was local bloggers, beat guys, national guys, thought that Buffalo was all in on him and that they were going to go out and get him. We heard a bunch of rumors all day long. You heard it was just between the Bills and the Jets. It was going to happen quick. Everything was moving quick. Even the most reliable sources are saying this. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, leak-proof Buffalo comes in, Mitch Morse out of nowhere, and Bill's Twitter goes nuts. Paradis ends up not signing a big deal at all, didn't even get close to what Mitch Morse got. There was no real competition. I don't really know what happened behind the scenes. Obviously, like you said, there's got to be some injury concerns, but just kind of out of nowhere, the top center in free agency just kind of falls apart. And I think it goes to show you that everything leading up to free agency that you might think values, where values are, where guys have guys, it's almost like the draft. Everybody's board is different. Everybody is, their pro scouting department is seeing things a lot differently. And once negotiations happen, man, things move quick and guys fall off and they don't want anything to do with guys if the value's not right. And so I'm happy with Mitch Morse. I would have been probably happy with Paradis.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm just really happy. I don't know that Mitch Morse is going to be the perfect center. I don't know that he's worth the contract that they gave him. That's all kind of a relative thing. They've got him now. And I think it was a huge improvement to the interior line. I'm hoping that they continue to improve around him and on the ends because that's the number one priority here. And we'll talk about some of the other guys, the day two guys, and the flexibility that offers them. But I'm really happy that they went after a guy, they targeted a guy, and we're not scared to say, you know what, we'll make you the highest paid guy. We're going to keep you here long term with our hopeful franchise quarterback.
Yeah, and I think we touched on it that we wanted one of Paradis or Morse, and Paradis got $9 million a year. Morse got $11 million. It makes sense that the guy that was 3 years younger got the longer deal with the more guarantees. Obviously, a 26-year-old is going to get a longer, more guaranteed deal than a 29-year-old. I was surprised that Morse got $11 million a year and Paradis wasn't able to get close to that. I thought that it would make sense that the per year number would be equal or even higher for Paradis. So, yeah, like you said, we don't know the medical reports. We don't know the concern with the injury recovery, and we have to respect the fact that they did their research and picked their guy. And I'm 100% fine that we knew it was critical to get one of those two starting caliber centers, probably the only two starting caliber centers that were out there in free agency, and they got the one they wanted and got him immediately and locked it up. So I think we have to be ecstatic with it, and he is the exact guy who's going to be able to take that load off of Josh Allen. He's going to call all of the mic calls, all the blitz calls, take command of the center. There were some reports, Matt Perino and some of those guys you talked about who have some experience from the Mizzou area, and Matthew Fairburn talks about that a fair amount as well, that he used to be called the dad of the offensive line and is like a mature guy who's looked at kind of wise beyond his years and looked at as a leader. And that's the exact kind of guy you would think that McDermott would want to go after. So it just made so much sense once you started hearing some of those reports.
Yeah, no, I'm totally all about it. I do think real quick, one thing, the chat room's buzzing and I'm getting messages here and we'll talk about it a little bit, but obviously the Bills did just sign Andre Roberts from the New York Jets. I'm distracted by the constant messages coming up. So I'm in the chat room going. So I did want to just say that here. That's part of the fun.
News.
Kind of part of the fun of going online and doing the show. And also a testament to our Slack channel, because I got multiple messages from our premium Slack channel that you can get in right now for $10 by going to cover1.net. Multiple people messaging us. So like Greg said, people are scouring the internet, and if you're off doing something, you're going to get that news. So anyway, Andre Roberts, we'll talk about that here at the very end of our free agency, and maybe we'll get more additions.
I have 17 messages about it. So yeah, we'll touch on that here in a bit, because our next day, that wrapped it up for day one. So Day one,
a good day one. What would you give for a grade on day one when you fell asleep? If you fell asleep that night, where were you? Where was your head at?
I was a solid B plus.
Okay.
Again, Tyler Croft wasn't the tight end I would have picked, but he was the exact caliber of guy. I spent a lot more time defending Frank Gore than I actually liked it. He's still an old running back. I don't love that. Kevin Johnson was fine at cornerback, and Mitch Morse was one of the two centers we wanted. We paid him a ton of money. I kind of thought we were going to pick Paradis. So it wasn't an A plus, but we checked off 4 boxes of things that I expected, all at reasonable numbers with great terms to the contract that protected the team. So it was a solid B plus to me.
See, I gave it a B minus, and mostly because everything was pretty much a meh for me outside of Morse, but the contracts, I really like the way the contracts were developed. So I had a B minus, and as much as people think I'm Homer, I tried to not, I probably would have given it a B plus, but I tried to kick it down a notch so I didn't get killed on Twitter.
No, I think that's fair. And I think that was a good steady start. And then we went into day 2. It was actually a little bit of a slow start. There wasn't any news really all morning, kind of refreshing everything, waiting for something to happen. And then boom, back to back, news broke of 2 wide receiver signings. We'll go through them one at a time. First was John Smoke Brown, a guy that we had some kind of flirting with last year, offered him probably pretty darn close to this same contract last year. And he ended up at the time we were doing this, I debated this with some fans that at the time we offered him that contract, we literally only had Nathan Peterman on the roster. We had traded Tyrod. We didn't have a high first round pick yet. We hadn't even done the Cordy trade yet. We were looking to trade up for a rookie quarterback, but nobody knew who we were going to get. And he picked to protect his value on a 1-year deal with Joe Flacco instead, which I can get. In hindsight, he didn't look great, but I get that. Now he has the chance to come play with Josh Allen, the biggest arm in the league. He is arguably the best deep ball receiver in the league, and some metrics have him as the best deep ball receiver in the league. 3 years, $27 million, about $9 million a year. First year cap number 7.5, but it's actually, and I think it was Rodek who broke this out, said it's really 3 consecutive 1-year contracts for the team, or 1-year team options. So there's no guaranteed money past this year, no dead cap. And it pretty much gives the team the option that if he plays well, he keeps earning his money at a fair market rate. And if he doesn't, we move on with nothing lost there. So it was a great opportunity and a great value for what I saw as a major need of a deep threat that stretches the field opposite Robert Foster and can take the top off the defense with a quarterback that now has another guy that he can try to outthrow and probably can run under just about any throw he makes. So I really like the John Brown signing, probably my favorite, even though Mitch Morse is more important. He was probably my favorite signing of the group, just because he was one that I specifically wanted. Probably, honestly, the only name on here that I specifically projected and wanted that guy. They went out and got him, and I was really happy about it.
Yeah, I am not as happy about it, but I'm still happy about it. You know what I mean? Like, I do think it's a good signing. I think that it's a nice fit. I think that some of the reaction that I've seen to him is a little bit of that. We're projecting him to maybe be a bigger weapon than he is. And that's okay because of how bad the wide receiver room was last year. He's a huge upgrade to what we had. Absolutely. And I think that he provides a lot of versatility. And like you said, a guy that can really chase down a Josh Allen deep ball. I think he's more than that though. I think that, people just see the speed and the deep ball stats. He is a little bit more than that. You heard Jordan Palmer talking on One Bills Live today. He was on talking about him in his time in Arizona and being a guy that plays bigger than he is, and talking about having had played with guys that are 6'4" but play smaller than they are. And that is a real thing, that people can play bigger than they are. So all that is nice. I just want to pump the brakes on for fans. He hasn't had a ton of production in his career. He had one very productive year in Arizona. Outside of that, he's been okay. He's had decent production in the NFL, but nothing to get excited that this really fixes our wide receiver room. I think it adds to it. It creates some value to the wide receiver room. But I was seeing people on Twitter saying, with him, and then obviously when we'll talk about Beasley in a second, that wide receiver set, we don't need to go any further. We've locked down this room. And I don't think that that's the truth at all. I would still like to bring in a guy through the draft. And if guys are available for trade or fall off of rosters, I'm totally down with bettering this room. I think these guys improve the room absolutely in one day. Great improvement, but it doesn't check off the box for me that this room's all set.
Yeah, I think both of us were in the same mindset that we expected multiple additions through free agency in the draft. I projected it as 3 wide receiver additions. I thought it was going to be 1 free agent and 2 draft. Now it was 2 free agents, and I think it's still going to be 1 draft, but 2 is not crazy. And when you look at our wide receiver room, honestly, the only people I feel are I'll say guarantee, pretty firm guarantee to make the roster are looking at someone like Zay Jones and Robert Foster. Anyone else beyond that is not a guarantee. Obviously, John Brown and Cole Beasley are now being able to look at where their deals are and what they were given. But beyond that, we're still looking at a Duke Williams or a Isaiah McKenzie, and then likely a draft pick that we make. So if we keep 5 receivers, it's probably Zay Jones, Robert Foster, John Brown, Cole Beasley, and the rookie. If we draft 2, it definitely means there's no opportunity for McKenzie or for Duke Williams. If we keep 6, I think one of them could make it as the 6th guy, although that just changed with Andre Roberts now, because I think Roberts is pretty much specifically a return guy, but technically he's a receiver.
Yeah.
So that's just another spot of competition that we need to be able to look at. So let's move into the second receiver.
Well, and real quick, we don't get to talk about it a lot. I saw a lot on Twitter about people bringing up Duke Williams, and that's another place I would like to pump the brakes a little bit on. We're talking about a guy that is more of a projection and project than anything else. He's not going to be this guy that comes in and lights the NFL on fire. There's a huge bump between the CFL and the NFL. I just want people that are listening to know that he's not going to be the answer to that massive red zone threat all year long. He's going to take some time to develop. There's a good chance he doesn't even make the roster. We don't know. I'm not going to get...
I have a perfect analogy.
Yeah, do it.
Did you watch Hard Knocks this past summer?
Yeah.
He is Cajuiced.
Yeah.
Duke Williams is going to be our Cajuiced.
Yeah.
He's going to be an awesome story. Everyone's going to love him in camp. He's going to be really fun, and we're all going to be excited about it. But really, he's not going to be that big of a part of the team, and then he's going to get cut in the last cut down.
Yeah.
And that's what Duke Williams is going to be in my mind. Now, there's a chance. There's a chance that he balls out in training camp and preseason and makes this roster. But with the signings that we just made with John Brown, Cole Beasley, Andre Roberts, the guys we already had on the roster, I'm going to say it's pretty low percentage chance that he makes this team. So that's awesome. That's a guy that we were really kind of hoping and counting on and looking for someone to be able to make this team. And now it's going to be really hard for him to make the team. And that's great, because that means if he does, that means he played his ass off and was fantastic. So that's an awesome problem to have. But no, it's the exact same conversation we had about Jason Kroom, less or not quite the same degree as Levi Wallace and Robert Foster, who are obviously very likely to make the team. Ron Beck in the chat just brought up probably a practice squad guy, very likely. I'd love Duke Williams to be able to hide him on the practice squad, let him play around there, and if things don't work out with one of these receivers, you have him to be able to bring up. But that's the kind of thing we're going to be looking at here in late August. Is we have a much deeper team than we've had in a long time, and we're going to have some of those tough calls. So that's a great example to bring up.
Yeah, no, definitely. So who we got next?
The second receiver brought in, which was honestly like 10 minutes later, was Cole Beasley. So Cole Beasley is the little slot receiver from Dallas that a lot of people kind of saw over the past couple of years. A handful of you probably had him on your fantasy team. They brought him in for a 4-year, $29 million deal. First year cap number was only 6.9. So it was also the second 4-year deal we gave out. He's another one that we could get out of the deal in 2020, but realistically, he's on this team for the next 2 years plus, and probably here till 2021, because he has some pretty decent cap, the way his salary cap or signing bonus was spread out. He's very likely on this team for sure the next 2 years, if not longer. But he is a guy that if you watched any of the highlights that came out or followed him beforehand, he might have the fastest feet in the NFL. This dude runs ridiculous routes. And I will say, I know Eric kind of warned us that as we were going into this and we were talking about Adam Humphries and we talked about Cole Beasley, but a lot of the focus was on an Adam Humphries type guy. We talked about it with Amendola. We talked about it with some of those different guys, that the smaller, shiftier slot receiver maybe isn't the perfect fit with a guy like Josh, because they're most valuable with a really precision accuracy guy. The one exception I think Beasley brings into this is he's so quick with his feet that he flashes open to a greater degree than what most slot receivers do. Some of those highlights, he toasts those corners and really genuinely flashes open. And now down the line in a couple years, I think that if things go well, Beasley and Josh can build that kind of camaraderie and simpatico setup where he knows where he's going to go. And it's annoying, but the way that Edelman and Brady are, maybe they can build that kind of relationship. But in the beginning, it's great that Cole Beasley has such great feet and can flash open so aggressively that he's going to be able to push wide open. And Josh is like, oh, hey, there's a guy that's open, and rifle the ball into his chest and can see it and get it there. And I actually think that Beasley's, his footwork and route running is so good that he's going to be able to visually flash open and Josh can rifle him the ball. And I think that that's a skill set that can really translate.
Yeah, this one actually made me more excited than Smoke Brown, only because I like the big playability that we get from Brown and the ability to stretch the defense. But what I like here is the route running and the high catch percentage. He's a reliable target who knows how to get open in the NFL, and it's all on tape. We've seen it. And he was underutilized the last 2 seasons in Dallas, complained about it openly, didn't want to be there anymore, wasn't willing to give him the hometown discount. I think that I saw somewhere where he's hoping to get 75 catches or something a year. I think that's a little.
That might not be. No receiver in our offense might be.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they were probably like, yeah, sure, we'll get you 70. Yeah, no, that's a great deal. Just sign here. But that's nice to see that he wants to be a vocal part of the offense and a contributing part. But what I like the best is I think that this is going to be the kind of guy, in a weird way. You always hear about tight ends being a quarterback security blanket. I think Cole Beasley is going to become Josh Allen's security blanket, in that he's going to get open. He's going to be able to create separation with routes, not just speed. Zay Jones has trouble creating separation with routes. He's just not the best route runner. He's not the fastest guy, the strongest guy, so he's not going to be there. Robert Foster, still not a great route runner. He got better as the year ended, but he still relies primarily on athleticism to get open. But Cole Beasley is going to be the guy that's constantly going to be open. I think he's going to be a bit of a red zone threat. You see him, a lot of his highlights in the red zone. He's so shifty that he can create just enough space, 2 to 3 yards of space, to be open for a touchdown. I think Josh is going to come to rely on that. And you had mentioned, the little guys don't have the biggest catch radius all the time, but if you go through and watch some of his plays, the guy's willing to go out and get the ball. His catch radius is bigger than his actual size, so I'm not worried about that much. And another thing that I like about him and Brown is the line is not going to be totally fixed this year. They're going to take some time to gel no matter what. There's going to be a lot of scrambling breakdown plays for Josh Allen this year. And when you have Smoke on one side being able to just bust out over the top, and then you have Beasley who just knows how to find space and get open. Those are 2 guys that we didn't have last year, that when a play breaks down, they know to get into scramble mode, and Josh Allen's going to really rely on that. So this one made me a little bit more excited, just out of the comfort. I think that it's going to be a nice security blanket for Josh, but not in a traditional sense.
Yeah, and I think that a comment I've made several times, especially in the Slack channel, the guys in the Slack channel are going to laugh when they hear this. Noah asked a good question here in the chat about what does this do to Zay Jones? And my answer is I don't care. I used the example before that I like Zay Jones. I'm glad he's on this team. I think he still has potential, but at no point in the past 2 months that Bean has been preparing for this, should he have ever gone, oh, we don't need that player because we already have Zay Jones. That sentence never came out of his mouth, because Zay Jones is a perfectly fine player. He's not the reason that you don't go sign a Cole Beasley and that say, oh, well, we don't need Cole Beasley because we already have Zay Jones, and Zay Jones is better in the slot, and we don't want to limit his upside. So we better not add a talented player like Cole Beasley because it might impact Zay Jones' potential down the road. If Zay Jones can't beat out Cole Beasley to be the best slot receiver, then that was the problem to begin with. If Zay Jones is as good as people hope, then we don't have to worry. He's going to be our number 1 target and going to be more important than Cole Beasley. And if he's not, then he wasn't anyways. So there is no downside to adding a talented guy who runs great routes and gets himself open and is able to do what Cole Beasley does. And if Zay Jones ends up still being the guy that we hope he is, which I think he still has the potential to be, then that's great. And we now have another good receiver who can be more of the Larry Fitzgerald slot versus the Julian Edelman slot. And those both are roles that are needed in an NFL offense. So if things work out great, we now have 4 receivers that I think can all rotate rotate in with multiple different routes and things that they can do. But at no point should we make any decisions based on, well, we don't need that guy because we have this guy. So that we should never not sign a corner because we say to ourselves, hey, we don't need that corner because we already have Levi Wallace. Or, hey, we don't need that tight end because we already have Jason Kroom. Or, hey, we don't need that guard because we already have Wyatt Teller. At no point should that logic ever be in play. If those guys can't beat out the guy that we signed, then they weren't that good in the first place. And if they do, that's awesome. And we just signed Cole Beasley, who's a really good backup.
I think no there's maybe 4 positions on this team that I can think of off the top of my head: quarterback, middle linebacker, and maybe your 2 safety spots, maybe Trey White. Those are the positions that nobody's coming in and challenging for those positions. Outside of that, it doesn't matter who your name is or what you're doing here. That you're available to be cut if you don't make the team or be traded. And Zay Jones, we are definitely not married to him. I get that a lot on Twitter that, well, we have Zay, and it's like, Zay had some issues early. He did flash at times last year, but those issues still crept back up last year. He had a stretch of drops. He had a stretch of mental mistakes, things like that. He did improve, but he's got a lot of ways to go to really earn his job as somebody that's irreplaceable on this team.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, this is not me bashing Zay Jones. I like Zay Jones. I still think he has nice potential. I think he does that cool Jedi get up off the ground thing that doesn't make sense with physics. Like
he's a good blocker.
He's a nice piece on this team. He's just not such a sure thing that, we need to avoid signing other talented guys that might get in the way of his development. He's not that piece. We don't go out, that kind of comment comes into play of why we're not going to go add Ryan Tannehill or trade for Josh Rosen, because I don't want them taking away reps from Josh Allen because that could get in the way of his development. That comment makes sense, but we don't do that for receivers with Zay Jones because Zay Jones is just not that integral of a piece of our future that we can't possibly mess with it. We bring in competition, we let him fight for it, and if Zay Jones ends up our number 1 receiver, that's awesome. But if not, we now have a backup plan and have a guy who can get himself open in the slot, and I'm excited to see it. And like you said, I think there's an argument to be made that Cole Beasley could be the more important receiver. I just like John Brown because I predicted it.
Yeah, I hope that they both are the equally as most important.
All right.
So where are we then, actually, real quick, because you're a numbers guy and I can just throw something at you and you can add it in your head real quick. Going into free agency, we were 32nd, 31st in the league in total money spent on wide receivers. After those 2 come in, where are we at there as the position group as a whole, and where do you see the value of those pickups?
It's funny. We jumped from dead last to middle of the pack. So we went from being dead last with the least amount of money in the NFL spent at receiver to now being 15th in the NFL with $20 million spent at receiver, which is about 10% of the cap. And that doesn't count Andre Roberts, who I'm assuming didn't get a big deal, but got some money. So that doesn't count anything for him. But, when you start adding in $7.5 million for John Brown, average of $9 million, $6.9 million for Cole Beasley this year, he had an average of closer to $7.5 million. You still have Zay Jones, who even at a second round pick that's starting to get up there, 1.89, and then a bunch of minimum contract guys. I'm going to wildly guess that Andre Roberts is $2 million. I don't think he was going to get a lot of money, but probably more than the minimum. So let's guess that Andre Roberts is a $2 million player. That probably puts us about 13th or 14th in wide receiver spending. If we were to use one of our decent draft picks, let's assume that we use, say, our second or third round pick, that would put us probably close to the top 10 in wide receiver spending. So a pretty significant jump that we went from dead last to for sure the upper half of the league.
Yeah, perfect. That's all I needed to hear, man. We'll move on to the next.
So the next one, we'll do these ones in combination as well. You guys know I rattle a lot of stuff off the top of my head on the show. I spend an obscene amount of time reading about football and looking at rosters, and I usually like to say that I know as much about the NFL as anyone that it's not their job. Anyone who it's a hobby, like it is for me. You and I have, real responsibilities outside of here that we do besides just reading about the Bills. This is just a hobby and our side gig. I always like to say, I think I know as much as anybody else who does this as a hobby. I had never heard the name Ty Nsekhe in my entire life when the Bills announced that they had signed him. when that news broke, that was not a human that I was aware walked the earth prior to hearing that news. And that's pretty rare for me that I literally had never heard of him ever before. I will say I was pretty quickly reassured that it's a positive signing. There were multiple guys who had him on their list of like the top value signings. The Washington fans were pretty upset. A lot of guys saw him as one of the best available. Hey, he wasn't a full-time starter, but he could be a full-time starter for you guys. A handful of people ranked him as the best swing tackle in the NFL. The chat is blowing up here. He is an enormous human. I think he's 6'8" and change, 330 pounds. And when you see clips of him, he is a big man. So we gave Ty Nsekhe a 2-year, $14.4 million deal. That one's not live on Spot Track yet, so I kind of projected it. It just split it evenly at 7.7. His first year cap number might be a little bit closer to 7. I'm assuming that they don't have any guaranteed money in 2020. He is a little bit older, so he has a really interesting story. He's played in every lower level semi-pro football league that exists, like the Arena League, the Second Arena League, the World League, a handful of different AAF kind of semi-startups, and has played all over the place, and then finally kind of made some hay in Washington over the last couple years, working his way up. But he really took a while to blossom in the NFL, and now is 33 years old. So is a guy that is not a long-term fix, but at 7.7 million and all of that guaranteed, he's obviously a starter at one of those spots. I'm going to assume it's right tackle, although he did play mainly on the left side. We had a couple people who were some pretty high-end scouts tell us that he actually is pretty significantly better on the left side and may come into play with a position switch with Deion Dawkins. Now, I'm not predicting that, but I will say a scout, especially one that I know Eric really trusts, told us that he is a left side lineman. So that either means he's there pushing Deion Dawkins into guard, pushing Deion Dawkins over to the right, or pushing Wyatt Teller out of that left guard spot, and we're just going to have an enormous left side of the line with Ty Nsekhe and Deion Dawkins in some order. So it was kind of funny. I went from not knowing he existed on this earth to being pretty happy about it. Yeah. But just was an interesting path for a guy, for as much time as we spend watching football, just wasn't on a lot of radars.
I had heard the name. I have a really good friend that's a Redskins fan, and I'm like maybe his only real NFL friend. Okay. I heard the name before, and he wrote me immediately and was like, "You're gonna like this guy." So to get to the points though that you made, I think I've seen a lot about him to left tackle, and obviously people that know more about the position and his play than I do also say that it's a good idea. I don't think that that they move Deion Dawkins to right tackle for him in any type of straight up switch because of his age. He's not a long-term solution. So because of that, I don't think you just take Deion off of left tackle because of Deion's so much younger. And if you don't have really any type of solution behind that. So it's going to depend a lot on the draft. I think that this opens up some flexibility. This is the kind of flexibility we're going to continue to talk about on the offensive line. His ability to swing and even projected to play maybe on the inside gives them ability to say, whoever these best offensive linemen are, if they are guys that can play left tackle, great, then we can swing this guy over to right, swing Deion inside, or maybe we get a really good right tackle and swing this guy over to left tackle and swing Deion inside. There's a lot of different pieces I think that they'll be able to do here flexibility wise, which will kind of open up that board a little bit in the draft and really allow them to take the best player available. I think all these free agency moves filled holes, gave them flexibility of positions where they can really come into the draft and say, they talk about it all the time, but we know that need does matter. It's not always just best player available. You have needs. You have to fill those needs. I actually think that they're in really good position to go into this draft this year. There's still some needs, but I think they're going to be able to really go best player available across the board. And if that's the case, they're going to have some really interesting flexibility of how they put this line together. So I'm not going to project where he's playing yet or even where Deion Dawkins is playing yet. And that's a good thing for Bills fans that we don't know where these guys are going to be yet. And that could get really interesting here this summer and create some really fun competitions.
Yeah, and I think you're right in the sense that they're not moving Deanne Dawkins because of Ty and Seki. I will say Rich and a handful of other guys in the chat were bringing it up. Um, I think it's interesting that you could see if, let's say, that the front office decides Deanne Dawkins is not the left tackle of the future for whatever reason, that hey, that's just not where his best position is. I could see a situation where we end up drafting a guy. If it's at 9 and it's a Juwan Taylor or Jonah Williams, that guy's probably ready to play day one. But let's say it's a second round pick and it's a Andre Dillard or it's a Yadni Kajust or it's a Greg Little or it's a whoever, Dalton Reisner, and that they want to pair him with Ty Nsekhe to be the long-term left tackle, and that Nsekhe starts this year into the later end of the year, and that guy kind of grooms underneath him.
Sure.
Maybe there's a path there somewhere. I think more realistically, Nsekhe is the starting right tackle. Or if they draft a guy with let's say they draft Jonah or Juwan Taylor at 9, I could see them moving Nsekhe to guard next to Dawkins, just having a huge left side of the line, and having them together there. So I think that, like you said, the position flexibility is huge. It's going to give them the option to move these guys around. And the next signing is another piece of that. The next signing is literally our new Vlad Dukas. Vlad Dukas was on this team because Juan Castillo was here and he wanted a guy who knew his system and was a veteran leader and could help explain it to the other guys. Bobby Johnson went to Oakland and got his guy, John Feliciano. John Feliciano is a guy who started, I think, 5 games for the Raiders last year, had a couple other starts another year, has been a valuable, kind of backup fill-in starter as needed. We gave him a reasonable deal, fairly similar to, honestly, to the Spencer Long deal. We gave Spencer Long 3 years, $12.6 million. We gave John Feliciano 2 years, $8 million. Both of them are getting about $4 million a year. They are both going to compete to start at guard, in my mind. So now we have John Feliciano, Spencer Long, and Wyatt Teller. And again, maybe Ty Nsekhe. So those guys are going to be competing at guard. I think we'll get into it here in a little bit on some of the other potential cuts. I think that Chris Ivory, just like I said with Frank Gore, I think this does mean Vlad Dukas is going to be cut. Some of the other guys we'll talk about that, maybe they end up not making the team. I think that decision is going to come in August. I think that the decision with a guy like Dukas and Chris Ivory, just out of respect for them, to give them time to try to make another roster, I think are the 2 releases that we see pretty quickly here, maybe even by the end of this week, that they end up getting cut. And I think that, again, John Feliciano is very literally our new Vlad Dukas. He came in because he knows Bobby Johnson's system. He can be a starter if he needs to be. He could be a valuable backup if he needs to be. He played some tackle in college. He's played both guard spots on each side. I think that he's a valuable piece there that either pushes Wyatt Teller for the starting spot or starts himself, or keeps Teller motivated. And that's a valuable piece of, starting caliber depth. And he's that same kind of guy we talked about with Raphael Bush or with, any other, valuable veteran backup, what Jordan Phillips kind of was, what Julian Stanford was at linebacker, that they can competently fill in or just be a good quality backup.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head with the new Vlad Dukas. This signing does nothing for me. Yeah. It's nice to have some depth, have a little bit of competition. I think you can't have enough of that. I think that this is probably, unfortunately, we're going to see him and Long starting at guard this year, and I think that that's going to make fans very mad. I think that they're going to be the guys that fans point to, like, why is this guy on the field? I think we're going to see a lot of that this year. I don't think Teller's quite there. I know fans were clamoring to see him last year. He does have a bit of nasty to him. He flashes at times for sure, but he made a lot of mental mistakes last year, a lot of penalty mistakes. I didn't love what I saw from him. I just don't think he's there yet. He's still a long project away. They're going to go with a guy that's a vet that the coach knows can at least do what he's telling them to do. So I'm projecting at this point, without knowing any other moves, that we'll see the 2 vets playing next to Morse. And what bums me out about this, and I'd like to get better at these positions, I was talking to Eric about this a little bit before, that I think Morse's ability and to live up to the hype in that deal is going to be on the 2 guys that are next to him in the interior. I think the line is one of those positions, offensive line specifically, that guys can be projected to be a lot better based on who's next to him. Like Trent Brown, he's going to go to Oakland. I don't think he's going to have anywhere near the success or live up to the contract that he got, mostly because I think he benefited from playing for a great offensive line coach and next to other really good offensive linemen that helped him out a lot. You need help from the guy next to you on the offensive line. And I think that we'll be doing a disservice to Mitch Morse if we don't address the guys next to him, but we just might not have the ability to do that in 2019. And that might be something that has to get addressed here moving forward in 2020, where we're going to still have, again, a ton of money and some more draft picks. So it can get addressed. But I look forward to yelling at the guards all year long.
Yeah, and that's not the highest quality addition that we made.
No.
So obviously we need to take it with a grain of salt. Mark in the chat just picked out, I think, Eric's favorite guy, Chris Lindstrom. The draft can change everything. If we end up getting a Dalton Reisner, a Chris Lindstrom, a Garrett Bradbury, a guy like that who is an interior starter that could come in immediately and push these guys, that might change long term. Sure. But no, this was basically, hey, we don't have a 2019 starting caliber player here at guard. Let's add a couple. Our worst case scenario is that John Feliciano and Spencer Long are the starting guards. That's not that bad. Those are both NFL caliber players. They deserve to be on rosters. They're capable of playing NFL football. If Wyatt Teller develops and ends up coming better, that's a great step. If we draft a guy who beats out those guys, that's even better. If we draft a tackle that pushes Ty and Secchi to guard, that's even better. All those different things are able to, manage what our expectations are. This simply gets us back up to reasonable and that we have some level of balance. To look at your same question that we had at wide receiver, offensive line was another position where we were by far the cheapest team in the NFL. There's still a little bit of math that needs to be done here. They have us ranked kind of lower because they don't have the details on Feliciano and Ty and Secchi's deal, but they're roughly $4 million and $7 million between the two of them. So we went from by far the lowest in the league at barely $8 million total to $23 million, which is really $34 million if you add in Feliciano and Secchi. So having those guys there at $34 million puts us, again, right smack in the middle. It's not the most expensive in the NFL. We're not paying our linemen the most, but we're now competent and paying our NFL linemen a reasonable salary with starting caliber, NFL caliber guys at, honestly, not only all 5 spots, but 7 or 8 NFL caliber guys that I would say it's now unlikely that Jeremiah Searles, Connor McDermott, Ike Boettger, that any of those guys make this roster, because now we're paying Mitch Morse, Spencer Long, Deion Dawkins, Wyatt Teller is going to make this team. John Feliciano, Ty and Secchi, that's 6. I'm assuming there's a draft pick in there or 2 out of there. That gets us up to 7 or 8, and that doesn't count Russell Bodine. Russell Bodine, I spent a weird amount of time arguing about today. I get that people don't like him. I get that people don't think he's great. He's paid the same as what we paid Ryan Groy for a long time to be the backup center. Mitch Morse is a great player, but his biggest risk is injury risk and had some concussion problems. I know that Spencer Long can play center, but I think he's going to start at guard. I think Russell Bodine stays on this team as our backup center, and I'll be honestly kind of surprised if he gets cut. I don't think that it can't happen. Obviously, it's a contract that's very cuttable. It's $2.8 million with barely any dead cap. We save over $2 million by releasing him. There's only 500,000 in dead cap, so we saved 2.3 million. So there are financial reasons that we could, but this is a guy with 5 years worth of starting experience at $2.8 million. That's valuable and worthwhile for an insurance policy on the biggest contract we just gave out. So
I get that back out. I mean,
I get that people don't like him, but he has a ton of value in what we need, and that I just don't see the reason that and I'll end tonight with a rant on, what we have as a roster now versus what we used to have to do for 20 years of looking for the most palatable roster, cap casualty that we can afford to cut. We don't have to do that anymore. We took that medicine last year. We can now just build the best 53 men. And I think Russell Bodine's one of those 53.
Yeah, no, I think He's fine. He has experience in this offense. He knows the offense. He worked with Josh Allen in the past. I think that you hit it on the head that if Long is at guard, they're going to need an actual backup center. They're not going to go into this season saying, "Oh, if something happens to Morris, we'll just take Long out of guard and put him in center." That is not how the NFL works. They're not going to move that kind of thing around. They're going to want a real, actual backup center. He's getting paid totally fine to keep him on the roster. I see, really, outside of them having two really good offensive linemen fall into their lap in the draft that can start right away. That's the only way I see a guy like that missing out on this roster. He's totally going to be here. He's actually fine. I think there was a lot of issues with the line last year. He wasn't the biggest one. He was definitely an issue. Wasn't the biggest issue, but he got pointed at a lot because he was a new guy. Obviously, the loss of Eric Wood stung, so neither one of those guys were going to live up to that hype. It's fine. I like him as a backup. If Morse goes down, we have a guy that we know has played at the NFL, played with Josh Allen, played in this offense, and that's a good security blanket to have.
Yeah, and I think that, again, if Dalton Reisner falls to the second round and Garrett Bradbury falls to the third round, sure, that's awesome. And if we stumble into that, then by all means, cut Russell Bodine. That's a great problem to have. My assumption is that it's not going to be quite that simple.
No. Yeah.
So again,
waste too much time arguing about that, though. If you spend time arguing about that, I feel bad for you.
So we also talked about, we added in the element of Andre Roberts. He is a Pro Bowl return guy, so that's kind of fun that we added a high end return guy. I kind of thought Cole Beasley was going to be that guy, but apparently it's going to be Andre Roberts. So we added a Pro Bowl level return guy, which I'm pretty sure that adding Cole Beasley and Andre Roberts means that Isaiah McKenzie is going to have to find another job.
Both Hay and Ray are gone.
Yeah, that pretty much seals both of their fates. So that is what it is. We talked last week about Spencer Long. That gives us 10 guys that we've added now. Amazingly, we added 10 guys, and realistically, we probably still have 25 million in cap space left.
Yeah.
Out of the rest of the rumors that were out there, Aaron, what would you like to see them do with $25 million?
All of it. I want all
the things.
Yeah, no, and real quick on the Andre Roberts thing, I was on Twitter a little bit and seeing people are, saying that this is another weapon for Josh Allen. I don't think that that's the case. I think he is just a punt returner. Hasn't ever really been much of a weapon in the receiving game. He had some years in Arizona where he was catching some passes and stuff, but he's just not that guy. I think maybe you'll see him in some of the trick play stuff, some of the jet sweep stuff every once in a while, but he's not going to be let Josh throw it as far as he can and chase down speed receiver. So anyone thinking that, I think get that thought out of your head. He is just here for special teams, which is great. I think anytime you can improve that, that's awesome. Who do I want? I hate to speculate on rumors that are out there, but there is a rumor out there about Clowney that makes sense as far as logical speculation goes. I think that Brandon Beane 100% absolutely has called every team that has a franchise tagged defensive end that could possibly be a trade target. It makes total sense. It's a need that we clearly have. It's going to be something that if they don't hit in the trade, that they're going to have to address in the draft anyways. And you have guys out there. We have the ammo to make a trade like that and the cap to take it on. Clowney gets me really excited. You've heard on this show me compare this year's Bills to last year's Bears and their ability of what they were going to add around Mitch and the year about Mitch. And then the Bears went and took a swing on Khalil Mack. Clowney is not Khalil Mack. I'm not going to go out and say that Khalil Mack's a one-of-a-kind, world-class athlete, but Clowney is in that upper echelon of guys that create havoc on the defensive side of the ball. And Frank Clark's also up there with one of them. DeMarcus Lawrence is another one, but it seems like Clowney's the guy constantly talked about as a tradable asset. That would get me super excited. I would be all over that. I think it's still a long shot because no actual reporters are coming out and talking about this as a legitimate rumor or anything that has legitimate legs to it. But the speculation makes sense, and I am a sucker this time of year. I will bite on every hook of speculation that comes across my Twitter feed.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of dots to connect that say pretty confidently we are going to add a defensive lineman.
Yeah.
It seems like most of that attention has been on a pass rusher. So like you said, we've been connected to rumors on Trey Flowers, rumors on, like you said, everybody who got their franchise tag clicked. I think that there was rumors we were in on D Ford. It was confirmed by John Wawrow that Ziggy Ansah is flying in tomorrow and going to be here, and obviously they wouldn't be doing that if they weren't serious about signing him. Neither of us are ecstatic about him as a player, but there's a contract, and Bean is a contract wizard, so there is a contract structure that I can live with for Ziggy Ansah to be able to go through and do that. And if we add that, then that's great, and that gives us an opportunity to have the depth we need. We need a fourth defensive end right now. It's not Eddie Yarborough. I'd prefer it came in the draft. I love Montez Sweat. I even like Brian Burns. I think there's a lot of talent there. I know Eric shared a lot about Max Crosby, a later round target that's there. So I kind of prefer going the draft route there. But if we have a chance to add a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, that is a slam dunk. There is no scenario where you don't add a guy who deserved to be the number 1 overall pick and has been a monster since then. So I absolutely would be on board with probably paying a weird amount for Jadeveon Clowney if that came to fruition. I'm going to assume that that's not the caliber of guy that we have coming in here. I'm even assuming that Ziggy Ansah is only going to be signed if everything medical checks out, and I'm going to guess that everything medical doesn't check out with him. So I'm assuming that we're going to bring in more of a rotational level guy, probably of the caliber of a Trent Murphy. And that kind of guy in the $5 to $8 million range. And that's more of my prediction, is that we bring in a guy like that, who's probably on a 2-year deal and rotational, and still gives us the flexibility to maybe draft a guy. And, I think that there are scenarios. I, again, had a lot of arguments about whether Trent Murphy should be cut, and it's just not a decision we have to make anymore. We don't need to do that. We don't have to cut a guy just because he's talented. He was signed by Brandon Beane. He played well. He played 13 games last year, which I think is more than people remember.
First year off of a major injury, too.
Yeah, coming off an ACL injury, he's not our biggest problem. If we were to land a guy, let's go with the dream scenario. Let's say we landed a guy like Jadeveon Clowney. I actually think it's more likely we would trade Shaq Lawson than cut Trent Murphy. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible that there's no way we cut Trent Murphy, but we only get like $4 million in cap space, and we eat $4 million in dead cap. So we would still need a fourth defensive end. So cutting Trent Murphy and then signing another guy to replace him doesn't make a ton of sense. I could see us trading Shaq Lawson and using a draft pick then on another defensive end to get a rookie contract in the mix there. I would rather go the draft route on defensive end and sign defensive tackle. I'd rather see us go after a Timmy Jernigan, a Muhammad Wilkerson. I actually like Darius Philon from the Chargers. I'd rather see us sign a defensive tackle and then go defensive end in the draft myself. But I think that we're absolutely going to see a defensive line addition. And I think from just connecting dots and who they've gone after, it's likely it's going to be a defensive end. I think that makes sense.
It seems they're interested in getting a top flight pass rusher or a dynamic pass rusher, because Ansah, there seems to clearly be some interest there. I don't love it. I'll go out here on the record and say I don't love it. I think Spot Track had him. I mean, obviously these are all estimations, but they had him as an average contract of 13.6. That almost made me throw up.
No way. If we give him that money, I'll be so mad.
I'll be very upset if he gets that kind of contract from Buffalo. I think he's more in that Trent Murphy range. I'm thinking single digits per year, maybe a 2-year deal with an option to get out of it. Something like that, because everybody that's a Detroit fan, Russell Brown, who does our draft show over on the draft side of this, he says stay away from him. He's damaged goods, can't stay healthy. He never lived up to his draft type. He's not that good of a player. He's just going to be a rotational guy that flashes in the pass rush every once in a while, but buyer beware. And that totally, I do not want to pay that guy $13 million a year. Absolutely not. So if we're going to take a swing, let's take a real swing. But I agree with you. I think defensive tackle is more of a need from the way I'm seeing it. So I don't know why all the attention's on defensive end. I actually feel pretty good about the rotation at defensive end. I thought Shaq flashed a little bit last year. Obviously not ever going to live up to his draft pick, not his fault. That's fine. I think he played well enough to be part of this rotation. I'd like to see more from Trent Murphy. I just like where they're at defensive end. With the loss of Kyle, though, and no long-term solution there at defensive tackle, obviously people on Twitter hate Star. I think he did fine, but again, not a long-term solution. So I would like to see that addressed. I think it's going to be a seesaw, right? They either draft defensive tackle or a defensive end, whichever one. It's going to focus on whatever they're able to get here in free agency. If they can get a defensive tackle, I think 100% they're going to go target one of those super athletic guys in the draft at defensive end, and then vice versa. If they end up with a defensive end here in free agency, I think a guy like Ed Oliver at 9 is totally on the board.
Absolutely. I think that we're going to see defensive line addition. Kevin Massar is in the chat as well, and brings up a good point that we don't have just about anybody under contract at defensive end coming up here. Murphy is technically under contract for 2 more years, but there's an awful lot of guys that come up, off of the books this next year. So that's why I would rather see us draft a defensive end that is there longer term, and then probably draft another one next year. And it doesn't have to be at pick 9. I do like Montez Sweat out of Mississippi State, but it can be a later round guy. And again, I brought up that Eric's a big fan of Max Crosby. There are other guys we can add to be able to get a rookie contract on the books, to be able to get that rotation and cycle of roster construction in shape, because this is the last year of Shaq Lawson's rookie deal. You need a rookie deal guy at just about every position group to keep that rotation going. So we have that with Harrison Phillips at defensive tackle. We have a short-term, relatively cheap deal with Jordan Phillips. I mean, he's being paid to play $4.5 million as a player. So I would rather see us spend the free agent money on a splurge. If we were going to spend $10 million on a defensive lineman, I'd rather see us throw that at Timmy Jernigan at defensive tackle and draft a defensive lineman or defensive end than let's say we sign Ziggy Ansah, and I do think it's going to be a little bit higher. I think it could be your number as a base, 7 or 8 million, but then with games played, maybe he could get up closer to 12 million. But if he plays that many games to earn it, then he probably earned the money. So
I guess
there's a balance, there's a structure that I trust Bean. He's a financial wizard with these things, that he could structure a deal that makes sense with escalators, games played, performance, whatever you want to add in there that could make it worthwhile, that could trigger a second or a third year at decent money. But I would rather see that money at defensive tackle than defensive end, and then draft a defensive end. But the biggest thing that this did is adding 10 players, which we've amazingly done now, truly allows Bean to go best player available. I don't want DK Metcalf in the top 10, but now it could make sense. I like Montez Sweat more than some of the other guys, but maybe we take Brian Burns, or maybe we take Christian Wilkins, or maybe we take Ed Oliver, or whatever it is. I like Juwan Taylor and Jonah Williams, but maybe we go another direction. Maybe they think it's worth it to take TJ Hawkinson. Maybe one of the top guys falls. Maybe something.
I did a mock draft earlier today and got Quinnen Williams.
You did? That's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing that some of the mock draft simulators that are out there seem to have Quinnen Williams available for every single team in picks 5 through 15, and then get retweeted a million times. It's just amazing that he seems to be available for everyone. But let's say some minor miracle happens and we do have a Bosa or Quinnen Williams or Josh Allen fall to us. That's awesome. Sure. The best thing that Brandon Bean did is freed himself up to truly go best player available. There are so many scenarios that can make sense. Let's assume we add a moderate level defensive end and defensive tackle. There's been a handful of names thrown out there in the chat. And let's say that we go out and get a Darius Philon for $4 or $5 million a defensive tackle. And let's say we go out and get another $6 or $7 million defensive end as a rotational guy. There literally is no obvious hole. Like, we have a guy who can start at every single spot, and they can simply go the best available player at whatever it is. So that is exactly what a GM wants to be in shape for, and can put themselves in good position to be able to go pick whatever they want. And I have some preferences. I would rather a defensive lineman or offensive lineman that's there long term. The offensive lineman we signed are older. I would love to have Juwan Taylor or Jonah Williams. I would like to have Montez Sweat because I want that defensive end. But there's an awful lot of picks now that could make sense. And I could tell myself, all right, I guess that's the best guy on the board, and we're going to take him. And that's an awesome feeling that I did not have Sunday going into this. And I didn't think there was any chance we were adding 10 roster caliber players in 2 days to give us that luxury. So kudos to Brandon Bean for that. I'll give him an A+. For the signings that we made, I'm going to give them a solid B plus because I think that we hit a lot of slap singles and ground rule doubles here to fill a lot of holes, and that was what we needed. He didn't cripple us long term. He didn't commit us to a ton of money. So I give him a B plus. What is your grade for the overall opening to free agency?
Oh yeah, I'm still a B minus overall. I really like the way the deals are structured. I don't think that I think he improved positions in need. I do think he put us in a good position to draft, like you said, best player available, really fill some spots in the draft with high caliber players. But I don't know that we got the best players to really make a huge impact. I think you talk about the wide receiver room being in the middle of the pack money wise. I think that's probably where they'll be in the league this year. I think they're just kind of an average wide receiver room, which is fine. That's a huge upgrade from where we were a year ago. I think the moves made over the last couple of days will probably result in more wins, but it doesn't move the needle for me to the point where I can go much higher than a B minus. The draft might do that and really get me excited in this team for 2019, but still my mind is focused on 2020 as the year where the needle really gets moved. We've laid this foundation of smart moves and all that stuff, and the team's really starting to gel. One thing that does get me really excited, though, I just saw a tweet from Spot Track about dead cap leaders. Bills are not going to be dead cap leaders this year, and that makes me so happy.
We're not the worst.
Oh my God.
We're not the worst.
Look at some of this dead cap money floating around, and we're not going to be there, and that's a really great thing. The swallowing the medicine is over, and we're on to better, greener pastures.
No, I think we have a ton to feel good about. And you're right that this is, I think the B minus makes a lot of sense. And like you said, this was Band-Aids. This was a lot of short-term fixes in spots where we didn't have an NFL caliber player. We didn't have a guy who could even competently put their name on a depth chart. And now we do. Literally at every spot, we can put a name down for all 22 on offense, all 22 on defense, and not be embarrassed without any of the draft picks. So now we can go into the draft and whatever we add is just gravy, and they're able to really supplement that. And the draft is where you really build your team. So if they've shown a great deal of skill in having solid picks. We're not going to hit on every pick. We never do, but they've given us reason to believe that they're going to hit on some of these picks, and that's going to build the foundation of this team while still having a competitive player at every spot in 2019. And that feels awful good. So I think there's a lot of reason to be happy.
Yeah, no, I'm super stoked. And I think there's going to be some more stuff going on here. Like we talked about, whether that's a big trade. Bean's known to pull off some moves that you didn't see coming. So, hold on to your seats. It's been a very quiet day. The Andre Roberts thing, I don't count as like a big thing. So it's still been a very quiet day over at One Bills Drive. I don't think that they're done. So stay posted and stay tuned to everybody here at Cover One, because we'll have some news for you when that breaks.
Absolutely. A big thank you to the chat. I think that the guys in the chat were awesome tonight. You guys were on top of it. I know this was exciting. We went kind of long, but that's what happens when your GM adds 10 different players. So including one live during the show. So thank you guys very much for all of that. I appreciate it. And I know that we had a lot of the premium members here from the Slack channel. So shout out to all you guys as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we got a lot of stuff coming from cover1.net. Stay tuned. We just brought on Antoine Staley, who was a guest of the show. He was writing for the Bills Wire last year. Super excited about his addition to the team this year. Obviously, Fernando's putting out articles all the time. So make sure you're heading over to cover1.net for all your Bills news. But also, while we're all distracted by free agency, it's still draft season, and we'll be getting back into that here this week. Those guys are still working on their scouting reports. Russell, Jordan Reed's got his draft profile coming out here soon with his big board. So lots of content getting ripped out by these guys. Make sure you're following everybody on social media. Make sure you're heading over to cover1.net. Like I said earlier in the podcast, $10 right now gets you a premium subscription for the entire year. That's all of our premium content, access to the Slack channel, access to premium podcasts when those come out. That's more of an in-year in season type of thing. But you will have access to all that stuff. And that $10 isn't a lot, but it does help to keep all the subscriptions that we use paid for, and just keep the doors open kind of, and helps us to continue to feed the content to you guys. So we do appreciate it. Go join. You're really going to like it. It's a great community. Make sure you download the Cover One app. You can get it on Android or iOS devices. Your stuff comes right to you, while you're pooping at work. I know a lot of us waste time probably doing that, pooping on the job. You can read all your favorite Cover One articles right there on your phone. You get instant notification when that happens. A couple more books of business here. You're here watching us on YouTube. We really appreciate that. Go hit the subscribe button and then click that little notification bell. That lets you know whenever we do go live. We go live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. But if you forget, that will notify you, pull it up right up on your phone, and you could join us every time we're live. And it also notifies you whenever Eric drops one of his dope videos of a player prospect. So you're going to want to get on that. If you're listening to us on the podcast stream, guys, make sure that you definitely head over, give us a review, follow the podcast. That stuff really keeps us floating, and we really appreciate it. Greg, where can the people find your handsome face and beautiful takes?
Come find me on Twitter at Greg Tomsett, GregTompsett. Have had a big surge in followers with the run through free agency here. I appreciate everybody who's jumped on board. Try to be able to bring everybody. I focus a lot on the financial side of things, looking at the breakdown of what we've spent so far, what money we have going, what how the deals kind of break out from that kind of value standpoint. So just that's my background from a business standpoint, where I focus a lot of my attention and energy. So you'll see a lot of things there, kind of go back and forth on what makes sense for who should be released, who should be added, and debate and argue plenty of people from that too. But just looking forward to it. I love to follow back Bills fans and have a good time. So find me on there and we'll have some fun.
Yeah, and you can find me at Aaron Quinn 716. I actually don't have any legitimate takes. It's just fire opinions that I have.
I can confirm that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna claim that I'm right until you prove me wrong. No, I love getting into it with Bills fans, all walks of life, Bills fans. So come follow me at Aaron Quinn 716. Just always down for a good time, a good argument, and talking Bills. And then you can really find us over there in the Slack channel constantly, all the time. None of us sleep. We're in the Slack channel all the time. So get at us over there. Thanks you guys so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. We can't do this show without the fans. So appreciate all you guys coming out and entertaining us in the chat, and look forward to talking with you next week with hopefully some other new toys that we can talk about, and as we continue to prep for the draft. So thanks for coming out, guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.